Hello and welcome to the Cybersecurity Hot Takes podcast. This is your producer, Joshua, coming at you today with a very special episode. On today's episode, we are so thrilled to bring you the presentation from Gartner IAM by Beyond Identity CMO Patrick McBride and Chase Cunningham, aka Dr. Zero Trust. In this discussion, Patrick and the doctor delve into the issues of legacy MFA and what companies need to look for in their modern authentication solution. We hope you enjoy this presentation and gain some valuable information for how your company can lay your foundation for your zero trust architecture. Enjoy.
We're good? All right. Well, welcome. We have a packed house. Thank you all for attending our session today. I'm Patrick McBride. I'm one of the co-founders at Beyond Identity. I think Employee 9 is the official account, so from the early days. I'm here with Dr. Chase Cunningham, and I'll have Chase introduce himself in just a minute. Both Chase and I are former, or as I like to say, recovering industry analysts. Chase is actually, I'm a former Metagroup analyst kind of way back in the day prior to the Gartner acquisition thereof, and Chase is a former Forrester analyst, so I feel a little bit like inviting the fox to the hen house here, which is kind of fun.
Surprised they gave me a chair.
Yeah, they were going to make you stand, I think. So we're here today to talk about the requirements for modern authentication, and we're going to dig into that from what are they, why do you need them, but from really a risk perspective. So that's kind of the unique perspective. I'm not going to give a presentation and prattle on about Beyond Identity. We'd rather have you come and see it in action. Just a quick commercial, just so we set the scene, is we believe, and you guys will be the judge, that we've created the most advanced and secure authentication platform on the planet. But like I said, don't believe me, come down to booth 509. When you walk in into the main auditorium, we're second row, kind of big booth there, and come by and put us to the test. Or my colleague Kurt Johnson is doing I think one of the floor sessions tomorrow, Tuesday afternoon at 5:40. You can come in and look at that and see what the ingredients are. Overall, we've got a solution, a single platform that is a solution for both your workforce and CIAM. So that's a piece of it. But if you were to kind of pick up the top level characteristics of our platform, it's passwordless, phishing-resistant MFA, really comprehensive device trust, and the ability to include signals from third party, from the tech stack that you already have in place, all into a rich policy engine, and then do it continuously. So we're going to break down some of those things and talk about why some of those things are important. But before I do, let me get Chase to kind of introduce himself and give a little bit of background.
Sure. So I'm a retired Navy chief. I did all my time working in a variety of organizations. I was basically an NSA civilian wearing a military uniform. Then I went to work for the NSA for a little bit. And I
Are you allowed to say that now?
Yeah, right. I just can't talk about what I did, but I was there. May have been the classified janitor for all you know. But then I was able to transition over to Forrester, did a bunch of work at Forrester Research, and then lately I've been doing a whole bunch of consulting gigs across the industry, and along the way spreading hate and discontent and talking about zero trust as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, for those that haven't picked up on it, Chase's pseudonym is also Dr. Zero Trust. So he's got, I think he and John Kindervag back at their Forrester days, kind of worked on that, early on, some of the pioneers in that. And Chase is underselling himself. He's one of the smartest guys in cyber that I know. So he's kind of on speed dial to a lot of folks in the government to work on some of these projects. So listen, kind of start from the top. I'm here saying we need, a new modern authentication regime, and why?
Well, it's not that we need a new regime. Actually, what we need to do is recognize that the bad guys have been telling us how this is going to work for 3 decades, and people sit around wondering, how do we solve this problem? I mean, you look at the number in the Dibber every year of how compromises begin and how they proliferate and how the life cycle goes forward.
Now, we've got a bunch of identity folks in here, as long as some cyber guys. So the Dibber is?
Yeah, the DBIR, the Verizon DBIR, which is basically Verizon's, I would call it an almost biblical reference in cyber, that they put all the information together every year and say, here's the trends of how attacks are successful. And if you have 30 years, we'll call it that, of proof that passwords and password management and access management is what is typically leveraged as the 80 percentile of compromise, why would you focus other areas first? I mean, because I do so much work consulting with organizations about how do we be on our zero trust journey, what do we do first, et cetera, et cetera. The bad guys tell you, like, they want you to have bad password, bad access management, et cetera, and that's how they're going to get you. It's going to be crappy passwords and human beings clicking on links. And then, sure, down the road, solve for your super amazing, crazy NSA Eternal Blue exploit. But if, John at home has got password 1234, which, by the way, statistically speaking, was the number one password this year in 2023, what do we fix first? I mean, it's not rocket surgery. Like, this stuff is about as clear as it could possibly be. Somebody says they're going to punch you in the face, you don't bend over and cover your lower area.
We're going to get a lot of those. Chase is full of fun things like what. Hey, so it's interesting. You said the more sophisticated ones and stuff, and one of the things that we've kind of struggled with is when the press writes about some of these attacks, these passwords attacks and stuff. They talk about just how sophisticated they are. Is that the case?
No, I mean well, the press obviously tells the truth 100% of the time. There's never any manipulation going on there. But, I mean, in reality, what we're looking at there's always an avenue of identity being part of this thing, authentication. It doesn't matter if it's a thermostat at home, a wirelessly enabled toilet, which I have found one of those. Sooner or later, somewhere along the way, it authenticates to something. And if you can't interrupt the authentication lifecycle, the bad guy continually wins. And this is not a zero-sum game. Honestly, I'm personally sick of the victim mentality that we put forward in cyber. Yep. The bad guy's only got to be right once. Woe is me. They just got in. And the bad guy has to be right continually, just like you need to be right continually. If you can interrupt their life cycle, guess what? They'll go find an easier target. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be better than the next person down the road. And I love zombie movies. We're running in front of the zombie horde. If you trip and fall, I keep running. Right. Like, that's what we're trying to get to. It sucks for you, and I might wave at you and clap like, come on, you can keep up, but I'm not stopping. Right. I'm not tying your shoe. And that's what you're trying to get to is I want to be in a more defensible posture and make the bad guy more miserable in my network than you, and they'll go after you.
I'm still stuck on the Wi-Fi enabled toilet.
Oh, it was crazy.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue. Right.
So passwords bad. There isn't anybody that you talk to that understands that I love my passwords that nobody ever, so they don't like them from a usability perspective and also from a security perspective. But wasn't MFA supposed to fix that problem?
Well, MFA was a great move towards an out-of-band authentication mechanism, right? And the one that I like to use all the time is there was a study published by the oil and gas industry. If you remember a few years ago when you used to go to the gas station, just zip your card, get your gas, and leave. Right. Fraud was everywhere. Right. So then they came up with that idea of, well, wait a minute, that's a card. Let's make you either put your 4-digit PIN in or your zip code and validate that. In something like 30 or 60 days, they saw like a 90-something% reduction in fraud. Right. So that one additional out-of-band authentication massively reduces the ability for someone to get in the middle of that. Now, we thought when we moved to MFA that all of a sudden we had uncovered the golden cup of awesome that would make this never be a problem again. However, a bunch of organizations have proved via APIs and other things and just basically inundating people with a blast of multi-factor auth, sooner or later you can get somebody pissed off enough they'll click the link. So it's not that there's not a whole lot of value to MFA, but MFA, like any other thing, can be manipulated and leveraged to cause compromise.
Right. So all the kind of user-oriented manipulation attacks. It was, I think, mid last year. I did Kurt Johnson, who's in the audience with me, and I did a bunch of CISO executive network presentations around the country. And when I was given the presentations, I was kind of coming in pretty hot about the issues. We felt like a little bit of a candle in the wind, kind of wave and say this. It's not all it's cracked up to be, the stuff that you've been using. And we got a lot of pushback. I mean, Microsoft and Google had said it's wonderful and it stops all the stuff, but now it's maybe changed a bit. What's changed? We're seeing this year when we talk, not so much. They're like, okay, we get it.
I think in the context of the big broad problem, MFA is a force multiplier, right? It's something relatively simple. My 11-year-old, when she set up her Fortnite account, the first thing she did was she set up MFA. I didn't tell her to do it. And I asked her why, and she said, well, that way no one can get my V-Bucks. And I was like, if an 11-year-old can understand this concept, anyone in the CISO world can get it, right?
That's a cyber kid for sure.
Well, she was protecting what's of value for her with a really simple thing. And she had a phone, and she set it up and good to go. So I think it's super valuable for the broad swath of where we're moving to. Right. But there are better ways, just like in every other space, to continually innovate and do things on the far end. I moved over to full passwordless last year for all of my stuff. And I don't miss having a password. at all. Now, there's a bit of a biometric thing there that some people
Right.
are concerned about, like, well, what if someone gets your finger? Okay, that's another problem. We'll solve that.
Yeah, there's certain threat models like this one that we can't
Of all
quite
the
solve.
threats I'm willing to live with, taking my finger is one I'm okay with. So it's good, but there are better ways to continue to innovate on that space.
Double click a little bit into the MFA stuff. I mean, there's a bunch of recent attacks. Kind of what we talked about. Say, you mentioned kind of what I guess is becoming classically known as prompt bombing. Send you a bunch of push notification attacks, and eventually somebody's gonna click on one. I've got some CISO friends who, there is a woe is me. They've experienced that to much detriment. But what are some of the other things that?
Well, APIs have become another avenue of compromise, and APIs are not really well leveraged for authentication protocol. So it's pretty easy to leverage the back and forth of that to get past it. Twitter, honestly, was a good example of somebody sort of manipulating the man-in-the-middle side and really getting to it. However, I would also say Twitter, in my view, actually expressed a good use of out-of-band authentication because they were able to at least go, okay, we got sick and tired of the prompt, somebody clicked it, third party, blah, blah, blah. But at least we know something weird occurred and we were able to respond.
Right.
So yes, there was a fire, but the entire state wasn't on forest fire.
Right. If I can't protect up front, at least detect and respond.
I mean, all cybersecurity in I think strategically is actually, in the Navy we called it watertight integrity, right? I want to be able to take a hit from a missile and keep the ship afloat. And how do I do that? I do that by compartmentalization, by isolating where the water can go, and I stay in the fight. I don't want to be the Titanic where they said there's no way we could ever sink, so we won't even bring the lifeboats on board, and you wind up with a movie where Leo freezes to death.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not what we want.
Poor guy. So is this kind of, is the MFA bypassing attacks, is it still kind of in theory land? You mentioned the Twitter one, or is that kind of happening?
Well, I mean, it's in the stage of be aware of it and start to understand, especially for like high profile executives and people that are going to be doing a lot of interacting. They're going to be targeted with it. I think now the term is not phishing, it's whaling, which could be offensive depending on how you look at it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's if they're moving up the chain and there's proof of concepts and it's starting to work, just like I said earlier, you can guarantee once the bad guys see an easy value proposition, they go where the money is.
Right. We were surprised, I think, when 6, 8, 12 months ago when we were talking about and getting a lot of pushback, a lot of folks said, yeah, but Microsoft, came out with a report and said it blocks 99% of stuff. Well, this year was interesting. They came out and said, hey, wait, there's active exploits in the wild, freely available, and we're seeing an attack on 35,000 organizations using some of those the phishing techniques that you talked about.
I mean, it's a numbers game. They're just blasting them across the internet. And if I send out, because when I was red teaming, I would send out 35,000 emails. If I get 3%, that's a pretty good number for me. And I only need a significant person to fall for it and go forward from there.
All right, so switching gears, so we've got kind of that as a backdrop. Passwords no good. Kind of some of the legacy MFA is kind of iffy at this point.
It needs to evolve.
Yeah, needs to evolve. And all right, so what does a kind of modern auth solution need to incorporate?
Well, really, I think the most important piece is the policy engines we're seeing now. There's a lot of conversation going on around zero trust and et cetera, et cetera. Really, the power there comes from the policy engine side of this. And you should be able to take in a lot of telemetry and validate that things are taking place. And using the policy engine at any stage in the life cycle, I should be able to sit out and interrupt what's going on if there's an anomaly or a strange occurrence taking place. And that it shouldn't make the users miserable. Users should do what users do.
Right.
We've done a disservice to our general user population in cybersecurity because we've tried to make them all cybersecurity engineers. And we've said, well, why do you keep screwing this up? Well, that's not their job. Just like I run my own LLC, I use tax software to do my taxes so that I don't get arrested. Not that I have enough money to get arrested, but they would do that. The whole thing is just making it where software makes it where you can do what you need to do and the telemetry is available and you solve the problem and go on about your day.
What kind of, so in the telemetry, some of those risk signals, is there a couple that, kind of come to mind that are things that you want to include into that policy decision?
I mean, the simplest ones are, does this look like what it has looked like normally over time, right? Chase works from home. It's in Virginia. He's on Comcast. Comcast, typically he talks to these applications. He usually works from 6 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Today, for some reason, Chase sent a login request at 2 o'clock in the morning from, I don't know, Moscow. Probably something we should look at.
Right.
Those types of things are super useful, and you don't have to totally eradicate the activity that's going on, but I want to investigate it. I want to see what's up. And the policy engines make that where we talk about the cybersecurity hiring crisis. I fundamentally think we don't have a cybersecurity hiring crisis. We have a mismanagement and misuse of technology to solve the problem. We're trying to dig the Suez Canal with spoons. It's doable. It would take a long time. It would suck a lot. But really, we should be using the right technology to optimize the people to do this at scale.
So when we think about like MFA and passwords and even kind of modern versions of MFA, which we'll click into here in a second, that's about, well, actually, let's click into kind of, we talked about some of the issues with some of the existing stuff that's out there, things like push notification or one-time passwords over SMS and stuff like that. What does good look like, or new good look like in that regard?
I mean, really, you move to that space where you're getting your average users off of the password, and your policy engine is taking care of everything, and your telemetry is continually feeding that life cycle. If you're doing it correctly, you could look at like the Lockheed Martin kill chain or MITRE or whatever, and you flip that not for the defensive side, because we also try and come up with this concept of perfect defense that doesn't exist.
Right.
I really want to be thinking, and he was talking about it before in the trends, I want to be thinking about how the adversary is successful. And all I need to do is interrupt them enough to where I win. And how do they do that? They do privilege escalation, access management, all those things.
It was interesting. I looked at the MITRE kill chain. You take the old kill chain, you take the MITRE report that dissects the kill chain and looks at the TTPs that the bad guys are using. And for initial access, there's lots of ways that they gain entry. There's a reconnaissance step up front. Who am I going to attack? How am I going to go after? There's another step. The first step is how do I gain initial entry? And by far, the one that they had the most threat actors leveraging was passwords, stolen credentials, et cetera. It was an arm's length one. And it wasn't, it was a bunch of the sophisticated guys. So the opposite trend to these attacks aren't sophisticated, like stealing passwords or bypassing MFA. On the other hand, the sophisticated actors will use them too because it's the easy button.
Well, and we've also seen some of the more, I guess you'd call them combination types of attacks becoming really prevalent, where even if I can't get you with a username and password and whatever else, there are people that now, because of the volume of information you buy on the underground, that are extorting humans to be able to get their access logins. And if you can do that, it would still be valuable to be able to look at it from a SOC perspective and go, there's something weird occurring here, because the bad guys aren't going to follow the same pattern as life as the normal human being. Like, you will find an anomaly and you should be able to react to it. The ransomware conversation is super interesting as well.
Right.
Like, I'll save everyone in here a whole lot of money on ransomware defense. If you have a Windows machine, go to that little search thing and type in PowerShell. If it works and you can invoke PowerShell, turn it off and you just save 90% of ransomware threats. Like, there you go, and send me the check.
Yeah.
That's it.
You'll take pennies on the dollar.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I'll take 1 percentage point of that.
Yeah. In fact, that initial attack vector, when we looked at ransomware, the Dibber also says that it was, when I talked to CISOs, their initial inclination is, ransomware, they must have clicked a link that downloaded the ransomware or sent you to a nefarious website.
No, they invoked a native program.
Yeah, they invoked a native program, or they logged in. Actually, the one that rose to the top was email with a phishing link that got you to give up access to one of the remote access tools, remote access Trojans, or not even a Trojan, actually a legit tool. So,
and brand impersonation plays in here a lot too, especially with the man in the middle stuff. It is exceptionally easy to grab brand and just change one thing in a domain, and then you've got all their information. I mean, you can be Wells Fargo because a lowercase L looks a lot like a 1 in a URL. Yeah,
we have one of the, again, when people think sophisticated, not sophisticated, there's literally toolkits out in GitHub, open repositories that are available that makes that like painting by numbers, doing the phishing attacks.
If you're super lazy, you can just go hire someone to do it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, I think the last exploit kit that I saw on one of the forums was you would pay $50 for them to set it up, and they got 3% of every time you got a hit in the bank account. Like, it's a good retirement plan. It's better than my 401k.
Yeah, and you don't have to do the ransomware piece of it. You let somebody else do that.
As long as you're willing to live in a non-extradition country, it's beautiful.
Yeah. All right, so we talk a lot about the higher trust in the end users and getting to that level. what about the device? It's the endpoint that we're logging in from.
Yeah, VPNs are, if you're running your business on 1993 or 1996 accounting software, you'd probably get fired. VPNs came to the market in 1993 and 96. So if you're using a VPN, you're using really old technology to solve a problem where you're literally piping someone from somewhere into the system and they get access to what they're supposed to have access to. So that continually introduces risk, and that is usually combined with a lack of policy engine and good password management and all those things. So it continues to introduce these things, and it only empowers the adversary.
Right.
Go on Shodan right now and look for VPN. You'll find a few million of them that are talking to the internet, that are open, that are vulnerable, and do whatever you want with them. Actually, don't do that and don't say I did it, but you could.
Yeah, this would screw up your retirement plan if they followed that advice.
Yeah.
So high trust in the user, establish, using other methods other than, age-old technology to establish higher trust in the
device,
endpoint.
I mean, your iPhone or your Android phone, I mean, that's a great way to validate, especially cryptographically, that you have the things there that you're supposed to have to be able to get to this and that you are who you say you are. You should be checking device health before you allow access to applications. And it's really simple. Duo did this quite a while ago, and they've gotten a lot better. There's been a lot of innovation around it as far as, is this machine regular? Does it fit all the policy requirements? Is it patched? And if it's not patched, you don't get access to my network. Here's a thing, go download the patch and then I'll provide you access. And it's not gonna make the user miserable. They're in plain English, they can figure it out. They can download all the apps that people do. You can click the download link to patch your machine.
Got it. All right, so let's, beyond kind of, no pun intended, beyond high trust in the user and the device, over the, in Gartner circles and other places, we've heard a lot about continuous authentication, which tended to be like do stuff every time I authenticate. Is that in kind of, does that fit the zero trust model? We have these long session tokens and...
No, I mean, the most important thing in the realm of strategic victory is to make sure that they go away after it's over with. You don't want the repair guy showing up to your house and you say, hey, would you like to move in and drink my beer in my fridge? And oh, by the way, you can stay here indefinitely. Like, you come, you fix my problem, and then you leave. So having the ability to revoke session tokens to get them out of your network and to end a session when something has transacted is super valuable, because then you get another opportunity to run through the protocol to make sure that they're supposed to be there.
Right.
You don't want continual access. You don't want it just unfettered, get to my network and do whatever you want for as long as you think you might need to be there.
So you mentioned this earlier in the discussion. I just want to kind of call it out specifically. You mentioned kind of user experience, kind of the context of passwords, but why so important? We've got a bunch of security measures, but hey, can't we go old school and say do it my way or the highway?
You can. It won't work well for you. I mean, the first thing that anybody does whenever a security control gets in the way of you is you go around it. If you've got it done correctly, if the security policy engine and the technologies are aligned correctly to enable the user, they don't know that security is actually taking place. They just do their job. I think it's very much like how the modern automobile works, where a few years ago you used to have to buy your Garmin separately. You had to turn it on, and most of us, while we were driving at 80 miles an hour, were plugging in where we were supposed to go and whatever else. Now you get in your car, you hit the button. If it's a Tesla, I guess you call Elon and he sends you where you're supposed to go.
Or not.
Yeah, but the rest of us, it's all there, and you just operate safely to get to wherever you're supposed to go. You don't have to know how all that stuff works. Got it.
So it was interesting when I looked at the kind of the makeup of the audience this year at IAM, and I've been going for lots and lots of years. I was kind of surprised. It was a rather large influx of kind of true cybersecurity titles and professionals. They're kind of edging in on the identirati, that we like to call ourselves in the past. And but so I'll let them turn off for a little while. But kind of talking to the identity folks. I mean, you've been on the zero trust bus here. Literally, if you turn the clock back, I think in the keynote they talked. People went back 15, 20, 25 years. Being in the identity practice, and early on it was about IT and getting people to their stuff. But it's kind of more important to that. What would be the message to our identirati these days?
I mean, you can't have security without identity and access management. That's as clear as I could possibly make it. And if you're not able to control what's going on and have the ability to do that at scale, and you can't do that with a spreadsheet, and you can't do that with Timmy the intern, you have to do it with technology, and most of us are going to use cloud and scale and all those things. That's how you enable modern cybersecurity. part of digital transformation. And even if you talk to your regular consumer side of this equation, just like for me, I check it every morning. I have Dashlane for my password manager for my personal side of it. This morning, I had 404 usernames and passwords that are managed by that. There's no way I could possibly keep up with it. So technology makes it possible, and that is, to me, the most important part of this whole thing to begin with. And on top of that, if you look at the DoD strategy, which we got published right before Thanksgiving, all of phase one is about identity and access. And there's a reason that they've allocated $1.75 billion to this whole thing, because they know that if they can take care of that correctly, everything else after it becomes part of the paradigm.
Yeah, so it, from somewhat redheaded stepchilds, you guys became like the cool kids at the dance. Everybody wants to hang out with you now, which is, there's not a CISO that I talk to that doesn't say that is the most important thing now. So.
Well, and it's important too that the seat at the table has been provided. Now is not to mess up dinner for everybody. Right. You know what I mean? It's like you've got your seat at the table, push it and talk about business context, talk about outcomes for users, growing opportunities. And actually, if you do it correctly with the right policy engines, I think before he was asking how many people had 15 IAM or something solutions. Right. You should consolidate that and get more out of one. You're probably never going to get towards the Sauron sort of one ring to rule them all cybersecurity deal. Right. But you'll get towards a portfolio that is manageable. And there you save money, and that's a conversation CFOs like.
And if you do it in a risk context, which, Chase walked you through, I mean, that's the lingua franca of the CISO, right? I mean, if we want to get extra budget from the CISOs, we've got to put it into that kind of context. And you'd be surprised at how many CISOs, they know identity is really important. They know they can't have a strong program without it. They know authentication is important. They can't have a strong program without it. But if you ask them about their number one vulnerability, they don't go back to that data in the Verizon data breach report that we see every year in your 80% number. They start thinking about, some 0-day.
It's not sexy. It's not.
I think it's kind of. I think these people are.
The blocking and tackling stuff is not sexy, but that's what wins games. Right. So block and tackle real well, which is identity and access management, which is policy engine, which is authentication. That stuff. Do all the sexy, cool stuff later, because if you get this right, that becomes even more doable.
One of the with some of the CISOs we talked to, for the last decade, if we're going to be honest, we spent a whole lot of the time on detection and response. That's where the budget went to. Not shockingly, what dwell times were. For an attacker gets in and kind of sits around for weeks, months, even years. It's like you've got a problem that you've got to fix. Let's identify them and do something with them. But we forgot the ounce of prevention or ounce of protection part of it. So I think people are really and zero trust is all about that. Really coming back, understanding that they are going to get in, no environment secure, but also don't forget the protection side of it.
Well, and the thing about SIM and those sides of it is it's like going to the doctor and he walks in and holds up your test results and he's like, "Man, you're really sick." And then he leaves. And you're like, "Wait, where's my treatment plan?" And they go, "Oh, well, that's extra." Yeah. Like, no. Like, if you're really sick, I want you to tell me how to treat it and fix the problems. And usually, it's a fundamental, basic issue. If you've got high cholesterol, change your diet. Like, if you're smoking cigarettes, put the cigarettes away. So it's those types of things that make a lot of difference.
Well, we've got a couple minutes, left. I wanted to reserve, if anybody's got any questions, you can just shout them. I don't know, there may be a floater mic, but kind of any questions for Chase from the audience? Hard questions only.
Don't ask me where I got my coat, because my daughter made me put this on.
Yeah, Chase has got, observation, great jacket, and great boot game. I've got some catching up to do. Go ahead in the back.
It's better than not. I think Fido and Auth0 and some of those folks are doing interesting work. It's a good way to begin the process, and there is an evolution going on there. So I think, honestly, where you're going to get to is going to be this combination of self-sovereign identity, policy engines, and biometrics that are going to basically change the way that we make sure that the authentication protocols are handled. But I would say that what you're doing makes a lot of sense, and that's a great place to begin pushing that initiative.
We think, the way we think about it is FIDO2 is a really good start, and it, allows you, along with other factors, like if you can use local biometrics, a local PIN code, FIDO2, good solutions in FIDO2 store a private key in a TPM, that hardware enclave that's, separate on a computer, so that you can do a cryptographic transaction to make sure it's actually Patrick or Chase. Combine that with a biometric, and you've got two really strong factors there. But it doesn't mean you can implement that in a not phishing resistant way. You can implement that you can implement that and still not have the device trust, and implement that and still not have the policy engine to bring in the other signals to continue us off. So we think in fact, we had Chase and I get to do a thing last week where we did this launch of the Zero Trust Authentication, and we did a leadership series on that. It was kind of cool because the fighter team came and presented at that, and we'll be with them out at RSA too. So we're kind of all in on that. It makes sense, but and I don't even want to say it's not good enough. It's a great start. I mean, they've done a lot in the industry to get us off of passwords into something much more secure. Take one more question.
30 seconds. She's like holding up a crook. She's like, get off the stage.
Yeah, we're going to get the hook.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, just kind of a quick reminder. We've got that floor session tomorrow at Tuesday. If you want to come and see that, we're in booth 509. We'd love to prove to you, the wares that we have and talk to you. And otherwise, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.